Like when I saw this, I was like, now mother, what is this? Hey my glam girls, welcome back to my channel. It's Chelsea, where we talk about all things glam and all things girly. I'm a beauty enthusiast and consultant who loves to talk about everything dealing with beauty and makeup, and today we are... Mother Pat McGrath gave us a new palette, and she's an eensy beensy one, a teeny tiny one. This is Pat McGrath's Midnight Voyage palette. It's a little tiny schminy tiny one, and we're going to be reviewing that today. I will be showing you 3 eye looks and of course comparisons to this palette to Pat McGrath's other Mothership palettes, talking about formulations and all those types of things. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and I would love for you to hit that subscribe button and follow me if you'd like. And if you enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, and let's get right into this video. Okay, so was anybody expecting this palette to be this small? Because I was not. I knew it was mini, okay? She says mini eyeshadow palette. Not anything new. I just didn't think it'd be this tiny. But this is what the eyeshadow palette looks like. It retails for $29 and you can get it at Sephora. Mother says that this is a mini mirrored eyeshadow compact inspired by Pat's most loved shades and textures. So 5 of these shades in this palette are from other Mothership palettes, and then she is debuting 1 new shade. Now on Sephora's website, it says the shade is Bronze Venus. On the back of my palette, it says that this shade is Sunset Bronze. So the new shade in this palette is going to be this one right here, and then the remaining 5 are all shades from her other Mothership palettes. I'll go ahead and swatch those for you at the end of the, or after we go over the eye looks, so you can see the comparisons there. This palette is limited edition and it weighs a total of 3 grams. But the pans are not teeny tiny, like they're not as tiny as I thought they would be, so I am happy about that. So getting into some swatches, and then we'll get into the eye look. Skin Show Divine Glow, Entrapment, the new shade Sunset Bronze or Bronze Venus, Extreme Aubergine, Eleganza, and then lastly, Night Creature. Okay, so these are all the shades in the palette. Very beautiful shades. The description says that these are some of Pat McGrath's most loved shades and textures. So she wanted to put it all in a tiny little palette for us. This palette does come with a very nice size mirror. I actually did use it today while I was doing my eye looks, and it's really nice and functional. So getting into these eye looks. Y'all know how I be doing. Sometimes I forget the order of what I do. So follow the tutorial. I'll catch up eventually if I get off track. So for the first eye look, I think I went in with Entrapment first. This beautiful kind of warm, neutral type of brown. Blended that all into the transition area of my eye, and the shade blended really beautifully. It also swatched very nicely, and it felt very smooth, very blendable on my finger as well. Then after that, I went in with Extreme Aubergine, the other matte shade. So we've got 2 matte shades in this particular palette, and I began to build that up in the outer area of the eye. And this shade blended actually very nicely. So just from what I've heard from other creators and other brand owners, shades that have purple tones to them tend to be quite difficult to make without them being patchy. And I feel like this particular shade is formulated very nicely. I would suggest work in small amounts, build up to the pigmentation that you want. And as you're building the shade, blend the shade so that you don't have any difficulty blending the shade, and that you're not feeling like you're over blending the shade or not blending it enough. But it blended really nicely, and I will say with the 2 matte shades, like a little bit goes a very long way. I could put a patch of pigment, a patch of eyeshadow on the eye, and it blended quite extensively across the eye, and it blended quite easily in terms of where I wanted it to go. So I was really happy about that, because Extreme Aubergine and Mothership 5, that's where that shade came from, is not that blendable. It is not that smooth. Okay, I'll save all of my other comparisons for the end of the video. And I went in with this gorgeous shade here. This is called Eleganza, and I put that all over the eye. It's so beautiful and gorgeous and blended very nicely as well. This one is more of a metallic shade, so I felt some fallout, like very slight fallout, but when I looked on my face, I didn't have nearly as much fallout as I thought I would have, so I was happy about that. I initially went in with this shade called Skin Show Divine Glow for the inner portion of the lower lash line, but it was too warm, too gold for the look of the eye. The eye look I felt was leaning more cool toned, so I covered it with Eleganza. Really enjoyed how the eye look came together. And I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I do like that this particular palette has both cooler tones and warmer tones in the palette. I would say that the shades at the bottom are gonna be your cooler tones, the shades at the top are gonna be your warmer tones. Okay, then going into this eye look, I was looking at her new shade in the palette, Bronze Venus or Sunset Bronze, and I felt like this could be a really nice one and done type of eye look or eye shade for me and my complexion, and I felt like it was. I took this shade, put it all over the eye. First I packed it on the eye to build up pigmentation, and then I blended it all over the eye, and I felt like it was a great one and done type of eye look, but I wanted to add a little more depth and dimension to the look, so I went back in with Entrapment and blended that into the crease and transition, packed it out on the outer edge of the eye and blended it across the lower lash line. And I think that really kind of grounded the eye look a little bit more. And then I went in with Skin Show Divine Glow for the inner corner and the inner portion of the lower lash line. And I think that shade worked beautifully with that look because it was a warmer tone type of look. And I really enjoyed both eye looks. Very simple eye looks, but with Extreme Aubergine in this palette, you can definitely smoke this palette out. You can make it deep and grungy. And I like that it's a shade that really can work for multiple complexions because it is so deep and rich. It can be a very nice depth shade for this tiny little palette. Now getting into the eye look that you see here, I wanted to use the one shade that I didn't use in the first two looks, and it's this shade right here, which is called Night Creature. So I initially went in with Night Creature, started to pack it all over the lid, and I felt like this shade was more, it was less opaque in its formulation, and you can see that too here in the swatch. It's not a very opaque type of shade. It's almost like a shimmer topper. So I went in with her Intensifies Artistry wand and put that on, and I did have a little bit of residue on the wand. So if you see like this like bluish hue when I'm putting this on, it's from the previous eye look. Sorry guys. But went in with Night Creature, that covered up that bluish hue, and it did intensify the pigmentation of Night Creature, which is right here. So I was happy about that. So put that all over the eye. Then I went back in with Eleganza, put that in the inner corner, and like every time I go like this, Eleganza and Night Creature together, chef's kiss. And then I wanted to add a little bit of drama and depth to the look, so went back in with Extreme Aubergine, made me a wing. I hopefully made them sisters because they're not perfect. Put that on the lower lash line. And then for the shimmer on the lower lash line, I mixed both Night Creature and Eleganza together. I love this look. This is definitely my favorite of all the three looks that I did. And I was very happy with this formulation. Now, getting into swatches and comparisons, because I do want to show you all the shades that she took from her Mothership palettes to make this one. And I am gonna preface this by saying, especially Mothership 5, that was the first Mothership palette I ever owned. I believe my husband bought that for me back in like 2016, maybe 2017. So my Mothership 5 is old, okay? But I will say this, I remember when I got Mothership 5, I remember using the mattes and thinking, I thought these mattes would be creamier. Now, I cannot speak for like what Mothership 5 and the formulation is now. I'm just gonna speak from, you know, when I bought it and how the formula was. So here is Extreme Aubergine from Mothership 5. It's so rough to the texture compared to Extreme Aubergine. Extreme Aubergine in this little mini Midnight Voyage palette feels like butter. So this is Extreme Aubergine from the limited edition palette. This is from Mothership 5. So I'm just gonna swatch, let's see. Here is my swatch from Mothership 5, right here. And then this is Extreme Aubergine from, I'm just gonna add more to my swatch there. And you can already see the differences in formulation. The one from Mothership 5 just looks so patchy and just much more dry, not nearly as even and smooth. And like I said, even though my Mothership 5 palette is older, I remember it basically being like that when I first bought it, because I was like, okay, maybe it's just my inexperience with, you know, darker shades. But it was definitely the formula then. So very happy to know that the formula in this palette for that shade is so much more smooth, so much more fine-tuned. So this shade right here is going to be Entrapment, which is this tan shade right here. So we'll swatch that. And Entrapment and Mothership 5 feels very similar to Extreme Aubergine and Mothership 5. Not a lot less smooth. So here is Mothership 5's swatch of it. It doesn't feel nearly as smooth and as soft as Entrapment from the new mini palette. And I'm just gonna re-swatch my initial one again. So this is from the limited edition palette. So much more smooth and also so much more opaque because the formula is smoother. Like if you look at Entrapment and also Extreme Aubergine from the mini palette, look how more opaque and smoother they look compared to Mothership 5. Once again, putting out there again, if I were to buy Mothership 5 like today, maybe the formula is going to be better and more refined. So once again, this is my beloved, my oldest Mothership palette. I still love her, still use her, but that definitely is a nice big difference that I did see. And lastly, from Mothership 5, we have Divine Show Glow. And this one, very smooth. And I'll swatch that right here in front of the limited edition version. And to me, the shades look very similar. They also feel very similar in formulation. The shade from Mothership 5 looks a bit more icy, a little more icy, not as gold as the shade from the limited edition mini palette. I'm just gonna swatch the shade from the mini palette and put that over here just for consistency. And yeah, they look pretty much the same, but I would say that the shade from Mothership, which is here, is just a little more icy than the shade from the mini palette. Now let's get into Mothership 8, Divine Rose 2. And we have Eleganza right here. Every shade in Mothership 8 is divine. Like, I remember this was the first Mothership palette where I was like, every shade in here is immaculate. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna put this swatch here because I went over the swatch a little bit with Extreme Aubergine. So there is Eleganza from Mothership 8. And then we've got Eleganza right here from the limited edition palette, and they look identical. They also feel identical. Like, these shades are both the same and the formulation to me is the same. So I'm not gonna re-swatch the one from here because it is definitely the same formulation wise and all of the above. So very, very beautiful shade, just stunning palette altogether. And then we have Mothership 3, and from Mothership 3, we have the shade Night Creature right here. Night Creature from Mothership 3 does feel more textured. And it also is definitely more pigmented. Look at that, crazy. And then I'm gonna take Night Creature again, and I'm gonna wipe off my pinky and use the same finger because, you know, I don't want to misrepresent the shade. And I'm gonna dig a little bit more from Night Creature in the mini palette. And let's swatch that right here because maybe my first swatch wasn't as good. Okay, there we go. So my first swatch of Night Creature is right here. I didn't dig too hard in the pan. So my suggestion, pick up some more product or like dig your finger or brush in that shade a little bit more. And now we do see a lot more similarity between the two shades. I would say that, I would still say that Night Creature from Mothership 3 is a little bit more deep. I will say that there is still some residue in my swatch here from Eleganza that I feel is making it a bit more light. Let me just give y'all one more. I'm gonna try to dig a little deeper. Okay, here is another swatch from the mini palette. Okay, so here's another swatch from the mini palette. Hopefully there's no more Eleganza in it. And there's the swatch from Mothership 3. And I still feel like the shade in the mini palette is not as deep and opaque and as rich, but still a beautiful shade nonetheless. Like when I saw this, I was like, now Mother, what is this? That's what I initially thought. But I actually really like this. I think this is perfect for travel. Like, I would most definitely throw this in my travel bag because, like I said, depending on what look you're going for, you can definitely do some cooler tones, a cooler tone look, a warmer tone look. I think, like I said, if you're around my complexion, this would be a beautiful one and done type of look. Eleganza is a beautiful one and done type of look. Also, depending on your complexion, you could do Night Creature as a one and done look. Of course, this beautiful matte shade here, run that through the crease and you're done. So I think this is definitely going to be a palette that can, you know, lend you a few different looks depending on what type of looks you want to go for. If you're gonna always want to use matte shades with your looks, then, you know, your looks may not always look so drastically different. But if you don't mind doing like some one and done types of looks, or maybe using all shimmers, maybe a metallic and a shimmer together, then I do think you can diversify this palette probably more than what you would think. And I'm very happy with it. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I saw this palette and I said, well, I'm gonna do my review and tuck this in the drawer. And now I'm like, no, I'm actually gonna use it. I actually really like this one. So I would recommend it. Beautiful formulation, beautiful formulation. I will most definitely say this is not one of those releases that just kind of checks the box. Like, even though these are not brand new shades, the formulation is beautiful. And I think for $29, you are getting a really good taste of Mother Pat's matte formula, her newer matte formula, her shimmer formula, and her metallic formula. And I really do enjoy this new shade right here. And if this shade is not new and I just couldn't find it in my Pat palettes, because I have all of her Motherships, I have a few of her smaller palettes, but I don't have every single palette that she has released, and I also don't have every single individual shade that she has. So if this shade is not new, please leave it in the comment section below, because I don't want to misrepresent the palette. But based off the description, it seems like this shade is new. So that's why I said it was new. But if you know better, correct me if I'm wrong. A couple other palettes that I thought of when I saw this one is Natasha Denona's Mini Lila palette. So we've got these two here. I most definitely enjoy the formulation in Pat McGrath's mini palette versus the Mini Lila palette. This was not one of Natasha's best formulated mini palettes. The shades in here are beautiful, but not her best formulation. So if you have Mini Lila, I don't think you're gonna be repeating shades, right? And your formulation is gonna be much better. I also, Artist Couture Extreme Mauve. So like, I really enjoy this palette. Formula is not the best, okay? I did a whole review on this palette, so I'll link that for you. I really enjoy it, but you do have to put a little elbow grease in it to make it work, to make it do what it needs to do. And I think if the formula of this palette was this, no-brainer, it would have just been 5-star reviews across the board. But if you're liking this palette here, okay, granted, color story is not identical, but if you're liking maybe the color story here, but you want a really good formulation, I suggest this mini one. I know that's probably saying a lot, but I did think of that one and I said, Pat's formula is better. And then I thought of Mama Lila, the big Lila. And you can definitely see there's some similarities between the two palettes here. Formulation in the mini and in the big Lila is definitely different, right? Like we're not looking at the same formulas in these two palettes, but I will say, once again, we're looking at color stories. If you want a condensed color story to this one, I would say that the Pat McGrath palette can be like a mini sort of inspired version of this one. And you know, these are just palettes that I thought of when I was looking at this Midnight Voyage palette. So don't think I'm saying that, you know, this mini one is a dupe for this large one. It's not. But if you're liking the cooler tones in this palette, so like this side here, this shade here, this side and this side here, then I think you can still sort of kind of get a similar vibe with Pat McGrath's Midnight Voyage. I really like this one. I'm telling you, I mean, if you don't mind a tiny little bit, okay, to give you some context of size, she's a teeny tiny one. Let's look at her blushes, right? Pat McGrath's blushes. She's so tiny. Look at her. Look at that. She's so tiny. So she's tiny, but I most definitely would travel with this one, and I will be using this one again, especially if I want like just simple looks. The pattern is already set for me. I don't think this is a complicated color story, and I think this is one that a lot of people can get some good use out of. So I say if you're interested in it, have at it. I don't think you're gonna waste your money, and I highly recommend it. So let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think of it? How do you like the eye looks? Do you think this palette is diverse enough for you? I want to hear all the things, and if you've made it to this point in the video and you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I would love for you to consider subscribing and joining the Glam Girl Squad. And guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in my very next video. Bye guys.